There's just something about public relations, or spin, that really gets under my skin, and in general, I think I'm a pretty calm adult. But when you've got all the evidence, all the receipts, it's all out there in the open, there's no vagueness, there's no gray area to these statements, and then even after all of that, you come along and deny any of those things happened, and you attempt to steer the conversation to an alternate reality, well, let's just say that bugs the hell out of me. My name is LtBuzzLitebeer, and I thought I was done with Battlefield 2042, at least for a while, but I've seen the recent articles, and then there's this PR spin flying in all over the place from Electronic Arts, and I thought it was time to just step back in and do some fact-checking, all with a strong dose of reality thrown in for good measure. If you like what you see, please take a moment to smash that big, beautiful subscribe button, and if you really like what you see, maybe also consider hitting the bell icon to receive all my future upload alerts. Yeah, so for this one, I'm going to skip pretty much the first 3 months from when Battlefield 2042 first hit the open market, and instead, let's jump forwards to February 15th, 2022, so about a week ago as of publication of this video, and we need to start with the now infamous Tom Henderson X-Fire article where he reports on the EA Town Hall meeting. I'm going to include a link in the video description below in case you want to review it over for yourself. But anyways, during this article, Henderson pretty much spells out why EA's top brass thought that Battlefield 2042 had failed. Now, first up is this rumored 18-plus month rework of the aging Frostbite game engine to handle the scope and ambition being brought to the market with Battlefield 2042. And according to Laura Meal, EA's chief studios officer, the engine upgrade was basically all new tech. It was like putting the game on a new engine. And this has pretty much become a meme at this point, about how the Frostbite game engine claims another victim. There's talk about its limitations, how it can be extremely difficult to use, that it caused the downfall of Anthem, etc. But remember that Frostbite was custom crafted for a singular purpose: first-person shooters and multiplayer. Now, Battlefield Bad Company was released in 2008, and this was the very first Battlefield game to use this new game engine, and the idea here was to allow Frostbite to grow and mature as the heartbeat of upcoming Battlefield releases. So, as those games became more ambitious, so would Frostbite to handle those ambitions. But an interesting fact here is that by the time Battlefield 3 had launched, so we're talking 2011, DICE had already experimented with high player count games. Patrick Soderlund, at that time the DICE CEO, was quoted as saying that DICE had done extensive and substantial research into 128 player count games and concluded that, quote unquote, it's not fun. So here you have one of the originators of those incredible Battlefield games of the past, going on record approximately 10 years prior to 2042 releasing, and he's outright saying, yeah, we already play tested 128 player matches. They're not fun to play, and we think that the most fun you can have is somewhere between 32 and 40 players. By the way, that's per side, so 64 to 80 man servers. And remember that these are the OG developers, the very men and women that custom created Frostbite from the ground up, that could understand its nuance and its capabilities. And they're saying 10 years ago, hey, we tried it, it's not fun. And from that, we've always seen a maximum player count of 64 players, all the way through Battlefield 3, 4, 1, and eventually into 5. And if Frostbite is not able to handle the job, maybe it's reached its technological limits. I honestly don't know, as I'm not an engine developer, but some would ask, hey DICE, why not use another engine? And this really comes down to two issues. One is that by using a bespoke engine, it could be directly tailored to your game. Like I mentioned earlier, Frostbite was custom created from the ground up in-house to be used by Battlefield for FPS applications along with multiplayer. And then you've got the second issue, is that by using a general purpose engine, for instance the Unreal Engine, then EA would be having to cut in engine developer Epic Games for 5% of the revenue once the Battlefield game ships. Meal continues on and states that another contributing factor to Battlefield 2042 not living up to expectations is the fact that while the development is going on, you've got this whole 18-month rework of the Frostbite engine, and then you throw in a global pandemic and the shift to a work-from-home environment. And look, I get this. As someone that has a full-time job outside of YouTube content creation, I know what has had to change, at least for me both personally and professionally. But what is not fully recognized, or even recognized at all here, are the absolutely piss-poor design choices when it came down to actually creating this game. The pandemic didn't attempt to turn Battlefield into a mass-scale battle royale game, as was rumored it was, only to see it turn a 180 when Warzone stormed onto the market, pushing out any hopes Battlefield would have of occupying that market share. Working from home didn't implement the Apex-like specialist, destroying the older and beloved class system. COVID didn't force the developers to install 128-player servers when there was clear evidence from 10 years ago that having that many players just wasn't fun and would hurt the overall experience. Being separated from team members and attending Zoom calls didn't completely remove the scoreboard. Sure, the pandemic and working from home could be attributed to outright missing features, as in the dev team just didn't have time to get them installed, but according to EA, not Tom Henderson and his inside leaked sources, but directly from EA, they were quoted as saying, Battlefield 6 is way ahead of schedule, and we first saw this pop up in February of 2021. So a full 9 months prior to 2042 launching, you've got Andrew Wilson, EA CEO, saying that this next edition of Battlefield takes all the destruction, of which there is none, player agency, vehicle, and weapon combat that the franchise is known for, and elevates it to another level. Now, this statement was paired with this defining quote from Blake Jorgensen, EA CFO, stating, quote, DICE is way ahead of where we were in prior product cycles. Now, this really led to serious backlash from the community, and rightfully so, as they received such mixed signals. On one hand, you've got all these missing features, and I have referenced this Reddit post showcasing over 200 missing or deleted features from previous Battlefield titles. And then on the other side of this, you've got EA claiming that 9 months prior to the hard launch of Battlefield 2042, that they are way ahead of schedule. Meal continues on with this last bit here that the community has really latched onto, stating that the game was stable and early critical reception was good, but then things took a turn for the worse when Halo Infinite multiplayer staged a surprise launch, and the comparisons between the two games wasn't favorable for 2042. Now, this was down to Halo being very polished, whereas Battlefield 2042 contained bugs and wasn't as polished. And this is where EA becomes completely unhinged from reality. You see, gamers understand that Halo and Battlefield are completely different games. They bring entirely different experiences to market. Players didn't need Halo hitting the market to shed light on 2042 and its missing features, how poorly it ran, and the boring gameplay loop, because despite what EA thinks, they had already developed their own opinions about the game prior to Halo launching. If anything, Halo just served as another justification for those feelings of distaste for this Battlefield, a further reminder that 2042 really needed another year in development to get into a somewhat functional state. Halo, no Halo, it really has no bearing on this argument as to whether 2042 was a satisfying product. Just days after Meal was quoted in this Xfire article, EA Communications VP John Reesberg sent out a counter statement. Quote, "These stories are not accurately capturing the discussion and the context," which was an in-depth and very humble internal conversation about the recent Battlefield launch. It was about key learnings and actions we are taking, not blaming external factors, unquote, which is fucking news to me, as this entire town hall is based on blaming external factors. An 18-month engine overhaul, despite 10-year-old evidence that 128 players wasn't going to work, working from home, but no mention of the poor design choices as the dev team attempted to chase trends, and then unfair comparisons to a much more polished Halo game, which, by the way, 343 Industries delayed due to initial feedback from players that they were not happy with the direction the game was going. They delayed, they listened, they polished, and tried to deliver a true Halo experience the players would want to play, and so then you blame them for not being able to compete with their polished product. Now, what this article truly highlights is the ongoing culture of unchecked mediocrity allowed to run wild at EA. When Meal points out that Battlefield 2042's negative feedback was squarely pointed at 3 factors: bugs and performance, game design and feature choices, and the game not aligning with player expectations, that should have been setting off red flags everywhere. Meal further elaborates that the bug count for 2042 reached a historic level for a DICE game, but that mock reviews prior to launch were in the high 70s and 80s, which, by the way, just goes to show that those early mock reviews aren't worth a damn or the paper they're printed on. What should really catch your attention here is when it was mentioned that the bug count for Battlefield 2042 fell into the range that EA would have expected when compared to other launches, but that player expectations have changed when it comes to live service games, and that it wasn't the right choice to remain anchored to the company's standards in comparison to previous DICE games. So on one hand, they are showing record numbers of bugs during testing, but that somehow falls into an acceptable range of brokenness that said that the game was workable enough to launch. After that, it's down to DICE engaging with the community and trying to make a game that they're going to want to play. Well, you had all the evidence months prior to 2042 launching. Case in point, players weren't at all happy with Specialist and the removal of the class system. DICE's response? To double down on Specialist with a massive blog post essentially telling everyone that they're going to love them, they just don't know it yet. You also had players that were extremely concerned over the poor technical state of the beta. DICE's response? Don't worry, the beta build is several months old and the live game is going to be much better. And the list goes on and on. In closing, I'd like to answer this question of where does 2042 kind of pick up the pieces and end up from here, and just giving you a dose of strong reality, but you don't need me to answer a question you already know an answer to, especially when all the writing's already up on the wall. When you shed off nearly 98% of your initial player counts just 3 months after launch, that points to the fact that your game doesn't just have some minor technical flaws, but it is fundamentally broken straight down to the foundation. Now, we've heard rumors about how Vince Zampella and the rest of this crack crew will be able to turn it all around, but I just don't see that happening. Essentially, every design choice and feature would need to be restructured, all within a bloated Frostbite game engine that is seemingly kicking and screaming with every little poke and prod. And as someone that has been with this franchise from the very inception, I'm just sitting out here shaking my head. I simply cannot believe how long it took this franchise to build up from humble roots to being an industry juggernaut, and yet how quickly it can come all crashing down over the course of a few years. I encourage you to leave me any feedback you think relevant. I'm not always able to respond to each and every comment, but I do my best and I at least attempt to read them all. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to receive all my future upload alerts. If you could take a moment more to rate and or share this video, it would be greatly appreciated. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and over on my community Discord server. Links to all my socials in the video description below. Thank you for all the support you've been showing me and my content. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.